All right, well, cool. Good. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this meeting of the Small Business Development Committee to order. Our first order of business, I'd like to begin our meeting with a prayer, and Representative Chastain, we're going to turn your mic on. You graciously
Yes.
accepted to do this for us. Thank you.
Okay, we'll say a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this day, and we thank you for the many blessings that you bestowed upon each and every one of us. We ask that you be with us, ask that you guide us as we prepare for the day and as we discuss and go through the legislative day today here at the Capitol. We just ask for your safety, and we thank you for everything you've given us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Chastain. All right, well, good. Let's get on with the program. We've got the Home Builders Association, and Cindy Morley, if you would please come up and say a few words and then introduce the other presenters.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Chairman and members. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about home building, the industry in Georgia. I am Cindy Morley, as you said. I am the Director of Public Affairs for the Home Builders Association. We represent 3,400 members. We have an equal amount of builders across the state as well as associate members, and they we are a lot of small businesses, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about what we do, the challenges we're facing, and answer any questions you have. Would like to say we appreciate this committee giving us that opportunity, as well as we appreciate the legislator and the support they've given our industry over the past years. So I would like to introduce to you Trevor Reddick, who is the president of Home Builders Association. He is from Camden County. And John Royer, who is the vice president of our Associates Council, which is a lot of our small businesses. So, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. We appreciate y'all being here. Thank you, Miss Cindy.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Cindy mentioned my name is Trevor Reddick, and I'm the current president of the Home Builders Association of Georgia. And I also have the privilege of serving as a commissioner in Camden County to represent our citizens down there. So, I've been a past chamber board member, still a member of the chamber, and somehow I have enough free time to build about 30 homes a year to help people achieve the dream of home ownership. So appreciate y'all hearing us here. Wanted to talk about a few of the issues, I guess, with achieving that dream, is becoming harder and harder for individuals. And so, some of the obstacles I faced getting, probably started in this industry about 10 years ago was first, getting my license. And people, often ask me, well, how'd you get into what you do? And so I started out, typical out of school, and kind of grew up around construction. And then, I started flipping houses and started the company. So I knew I wanted to build new construction. And when I started that process, it took me about 8 months to get approved to be able to go take the test to get my, contractor's license. And I know there's been a lot of improvements with the Secretary of State's office in that process. But, I'll never forget when I went in, it was like a 6-hour exam. I had about 30 books, and I came out, and the lady said, well, you barely missed it. You missed by one question. And I go, really? One question? She goes, I'm just teasing. You passed. So at the time, after about 10 months and, having all those books, it was quite a bit. But, some other things, I think that would help our industry and small businesses, across the state is some type of tort reform. And I don't know if that's something that's come up in legislation yet this session, but as an example, I had a high school worker that was employed, through the construction program in our high school. And, he was just doing minor stuff, cleaning up on job sites. But he was on his way to work from school one day in his personal vehicle and got into a fender bender. And they found out he was reporting to work and sued our company. And so, that's been a hurdle in itself. And, I guess today anybody can sue anybody for anything. And, sure, it doesn't mean they're right, but, there's a lot of liability out there for small businesses. And that's what, really some of the roadblocks and affordability to obtain insurance. We probably spend $50,000 a year just on insurance, between general liability, workman's comp, builder's risk insurance, all the various types of insurance, inland marine, commercial auto. So that's some things, that's kind of personally affected me. But, also, as a commissioner, I have the opportunity to sit in a lot of these zoning meetings and hearings and see stuff get approved and denied. And really what I've seen a lot of times is, often things are approved and denied based upon their popularity of something, in dealing with the people showing up, advocating, for or against something, and not whether something is a permissible allowed use by the Unified Development Code. And so that's something, from a local standpoint that has been kind of roadblocks to development projects or other small business initiatives. And also some of the timelines. So a lot of times something will come in and, it'll get tabled and, 8 months later, you still don't have a zoning approval. And, I know something we're working on in Georgia to try to help the workforce development is education back in school. I was real fortunate. Our high school had a huge vocational program where we had automotive, welding, construction, and, had the opportunity to compete with Skills USA. That's, association with the high school and the younger college students. And just a lot of great opportunities that we could probably, build our next generation of the workforce from. So just, thank y'all again for having us here to speak. Be happy to answer any questions, and I'll yield to John at this time.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I know we'll have some questions, but let's go on to John and let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so I'm an attorney. I'm the associate vice president for the Home Builders Association. So I'm essentially, like Cindy said, that we have the builders and then all the associates that are associated with the Builders Association. So I'm kind of the point man, for better or worse, for them. I don't think that anybody would say that there's any sort of barrier to entry to attorneys. I think we could all agree there's plenty of us out there. But with this, kind of a different perspective of what Trevor was saying, and I know this isn't a housing committee hearing here, but a lot of what we're dealing with, and like Cindy said, most of our groups are small businesses. We know we do have some big builders, but most of them are small businesses. So as Trevor mentioned, that the cost of the insurance, all those things, the regulations, and I don't have with me, and Cindy may be able to pull it up, but I think in Georgia, 26.9%, so 27% of the cost of a house comes through some sort of regulation, right? And so when you tack on the insurance, those other carrying costs, it creates a big barrier in terms of being able to make it, not that you're trying to make a huge profit, but nobody's going to keep building houses if it is too difficult or if you can't make a living doing it. And so I don't have the exact numbers, but I would imagine, with the exception of a few counties, there's a shortage of housing units, right? And we had fallen behind coming out of the recession in 2008. Then we kind of slowed down again recently, and so to build your way out of it's really not gonna be at this current rate something that we can do. And like Trevor said, we're trying to provide that opportunity for everybody. Kids growing up in homes do better in school, do better in life. It's just part of what America is in Georgia too. And with our growth here in Georgia, with everybody trying to come in, makes it even more valuable. So those regulations, workforce training, that's another thing that is really, really important, because finding qualified labor. But on the other side of that too, having the workforce somewhere to live, right? I mean, you want your nurses and your police officers and sheriff deputies and firemen and all those people that provide those resources to be able to be in those places where they work. So, I just think the barrier that we face with some of those things in terms of just actually producing a thing that everybody wants, right? That everybody agrees is a good thing, and it just makes a big difference. And if there was any way that we could help even streamline that process, not necessarily make any standards any less, but hey, still build up to whatever standard is established, but make the process for getting to that point easier, and reducing maybe some of the things that are more fluff, like particular design standards, right? As long as this house is a good quality house, you know, whether you tell me if I need stone on one side or the other side or whatever, it seems a little bit un-American, really. You know, it's my property. Let me build what I need to build as long as I'm building a good product, right? So I think that's kind of the angle I would take in terms of how regulation, how something that you guys could do would be able to affect that. But I think really, unless you have anything else to add,
No.
yeah, I mean that's to me those seem to be the major barriers there and the main influence of what we can do.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to open it, we got some time, so I'm going to open it up to some questions. Who was first, number one? Representative Washburn, you're number one.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your testimony. Have you all heard about two bills that were dropped yesterday?
Yes, sir, we have. Maybe. Just a
I
little
thought
bit
you
about it.
probably heard about them. Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Of course.
just want to thank the Home Builders Association for their great contribution in the development of these two bills. They have, Cindy and Austin have worked closely with us all the way through, and we think it's good legislation, and we're looking forward to the process on it. So I just wanted to thank the home builders. The home building industry is very important to Georgia's economy, of course, and very important to those individuals that would like to own a home. And I appreciate what you're doing, and thank you again for all your associational efforts relative to this legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 23, Chastain, Representative Chastain, yeah.
Just one question on the on building license.
Yes.
Do you guys think is the path to obtaining a builder's license in Georgia fairly easy? And the reason I'm asking that, we've got, of course, in my district, we have a lot of building going on, and we probably have a handful of builders that are 20-year builders, great folks that don't have their license.
Yes, sir. I would say that's probably a more common problem today. I mean, I think the pathway of entry to obtain your license is a little bit easier and streamlined. But I think there's a lot of builders out there that are unlicensed, and the issue really boils down to, and it's all about funding, but I don't think there's enough money going back to that area to enforce the licensees and you know, that process. And it's really just kind of, you know, I would say complaint-based enforcement. It's up to the local jurisdiction to enforce that stuff, and if they, you know, run it up a ladder and you know, file a complaint with the Secretary of State's office or something like that about the individual. But we're definitely seeing that across the state.
Yeah, but that's I would echo that. I mean, being involved with the association for a long time, that's been a common sort of refrain is how to handle, how to deal with unlicensed builders, things like that. I mean, I don't think the issue would, and I've never taken it, but I don't think the issue would be with the standard requirements to be that, as long as the process is reasonable and streamlined, and you know, if it's not too onerous, then it seems like you could go fairly aggressively after people that don't abide by it or are unlicensed.
Well, I've got a couple of questions, and you touched on the licensing procedure. To get a contractor's license in the state, do you need to get the technical training, or do you use it as an apprenticeship? What is the process?
There's really you can meet the requirements two ways. One way is just by experience and having enough experience under a licensed contractor, and the other way is through a combination of experience plus education. So for me, I went to Georgia Southern University and got a degree in construction management, and so that cut out, I think at the time, 4 of 8 years of experience, and so I was able to pick up, you know, another 4 years just by, you know, growing up and all my past experiences and work-related experiences.
Am I correct in the understanding that it takes 8 years of basically apprenticeship before you are allowed to get a license?
Yes, sir. I think 6 to 8, somewhere around
6
there.
to 8 years.
Yes, sir.
And then because of your degree in construction management, you were able to knock 4 of those out.
Yes, sir. Correct.
Do you think that's a hindrance to the industry?
It could be, you know, because I think for, you know, part of, you know, the message over the last 30 years about, you know, getting a college degree, and college is certainly a good choice for a lot of people, but it's not the only choice. And so I think there's a lot of capable individuals that are out there who might not have a college degree. That barrier of 8 years of work experience could be quite a bit.
And I would tack on too, to your point, you said you got a lot of 20-year builders. The home building industry in itself is an old industry. I mean, a lot of the home builders, so you do have a lot of big national companies, but a lot of small day-to-day business builders are the age. If you look at the age range of builders, it's skewed towards the older end. So the point is, you're going to have to replace these people fairly soon, and you don't want to be too far behind.
Okay. I've got, in my experience, it's usually been the industry that wants to put more restrictions on the licensing. Am I correct in the understanding that the industry wants to lighten that up a bit?
I would say we probably want more enforcement, for the unlicensed builders. But as far as workforce development, I would think we would want less regulation across the board. Even builders, trade partners, subcontractors. Not less oversight or less. We want to make sure there's qualified people in the industry. But I would say some of the things that could be streamlined, it certainly makes sense to do so.
Cool.
I don't think you would want to lessen any of the training or the requirements, but maybe
Right.
some different avenues. Like he said, college could knock off 4 years,
Yeah.
or maybe through tech schools or some other sort of vocational track, you could also make up that
Yeah.
time. Theoretically, even if you took maybe a construction vocational course in high school, you could add to that. I don't think it's like
Yeah.
make it easier or loosen that anyway, but provide other avenues to access it.
So talking about training, I'll talk about continuing education in Georgia. There's 3 types of license. You've got residential light commercial, and you've got a general contractor. And so basically those 3 tiers, a residential can only build residential structures, light commercial can go up to like 50,000 square feet, and a GC can build anything, skyscrapers. So the first 2 are required to have education hours every year. The GC, who could build the biggest things out there, doesn't have to have any continuing education. You would think it would be maybe the other way around. So there's some things that could probably be cleaned up a little bit out there, but
Gotcha. All right. Well, it looks like Representative Washburn has another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm intrigued by this, and I probably just hadn't paid much attention to it. So at every level there, there's an exam that you take that you have to pass in order to get your license, correct?
yes, sir.
Well, in my understanding, can anybody that knows what they're doing go sit for the exam and get a license, or do you have to do some apprentice time?
I believe you have to, and I believe there was about 8 or 10 pre-requirements before you could be accepted to go take the exam. And so I had to start in an LLC, I had to get general liability insurance before I was approved to sit and take the exam. And I'm not sure if it's still that way today, but this was about 10 years ago. But there was several things we had to do just in order to be eligible to take the exam.
Follow up, Mr.
Of
Chairman.
course, yes, sir.
These financial requirements, so at every level, and I've heard some stuff about the commercial level in particular. Is there a pretty strong balance sheet requirement that you have to have pretty strong liquid assets to be able to do that?
Yes, sir. I believe at the time we had to get a letter from the bank certifying we had a line of credit around $150,000 or so, or it could have been 50. It was somewhere between the 2.
If you can go in as a small builder now and get a line of credit from a bank.
That's right. Yep.
One more, Mr. Chair. If you're doing commercial, there's a performance bond anyway,
Yes, sir.
and you're not going to be able to get that if you're not fairly significant.
That's right.
So isn't this sort of overkill for you to have to show a lot of liquid assets to be able to even get a license?
It is. And like you mentioned, being able to bond a project is a whole nother level where you'd have to submit, like you said, the financial statements, an income statement, balance sheet, and be able to get bonded through a bonding agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Great. Well, good. Thank you very much for your presentation. What I'd like to do is go on to the John Halliburton and have him make his presentation right now. But y'all stick around. If there's any questions, I'm sure the members would like to exchange business cards and communicate. I know I've got a couple of questions that I want to talk to y'all about. John,
Thank you, Mr.
familiar
Chairman.
face, thank you for being here.
Hey, John Halliburton, Mo Thrash, and I represent the Georgia Independent Auto Dealer Association. We have over 3,000 dealer members across Georgia, independent used car dealers. This is the largest state trade association in the country. This morning we brought our president, Jack Carter. He runs Turn and Burn Motors. It's a dealership in Conyers. You probably pass by it all the time if you go up and down 20. And then also Jason Reeves, who's the president of Wayne Reeves Software out of Macon. It's a very large software company used by dealers, franchise and used car dealers. And Jason has a lot of knowledge with data, with what's going on in the used car industry and the trends we're seeing with cars. And he's also the chairman of the used car board under the Secretary of State, speaking of licensing. And then he's going to speak to the used car board and what they're seeing with licensing going on out there in the state of Georgia. So, Jack, Jason.
That's great, thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, sir.
Good
How are
morning.
you?
Thank you for inviting us.
You want to start, or? I can start. Good morning. Thanks for having us. My name is Jack Carter. I'm a licensed independent automobile dealer here in our state. I think the ability to do business here in Georgia as a used car dealer is pretty good overall. So I wouldn't want to only talk about the negative things, but there are some negative things to address. Overall, I feel like our state is a very friendly place to do business and be a car dealer. Maybe a little bit too much, really. One of the issues that I think is probably the biggest problem in our industry is what I want to talk to you about today, and that is the ability to get a license in the state of Georgia. Right now, there's some language in the application to become a used car dealer that that allows for what a common term I think would be a loophole. But as a licensed dealer in the state of Georgia, I have a physical location. I have a building, right, that you can go to every day of the week. I get mail, and people can come visit me, and I'm easy to find. So if you buy an automobile from me as a consumer, as one of our neighbors, and you have a problem, you can find me anytime that we're open. People are allowed to visit our place of business. And I believe that's how it should be, right? My cars are not magical. They're the same type of cars that you guys drive. They have problems. We have paperwork problems. We have mechanical problems. We have personnel problems, right? Same as every business. And anytime a consumer does business with us and encounters a problem, which they do, we are not without flaws, they're able to come to us, and we have the opportunity to help people when we've made a mistake. What I'm trying to address with you is that there is a very large number of dealers in our state that have applied for a license and obtained it legally and gone through the proper channels, and they operate out of a very small office.
Very small.
Very small, meaning as big as this table we're sitting at, with about as much room right here, large enough to meet the requirement. And the requirement would be that they have a sign on their door, right, that says their name. They have a filing cabinet that's lockable. They have a landline telephone, right? And then they have insurance and bond and that kind of thing. But what I'm trying to tell you is that they're able to obtain a used car license in the state of Georgia, which comes with a ton of responsibility, and they operate out of a tiny little box with the inability to display automobiles, the inability for customers to come after they have a problem. and the inability to be inspected by our state. So I'm sure that you guys know this, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. There's 8 inspectors in the state of Georgia that inspect licensed car dealers. 8. There's 7,000 licensed car dealers, okay? The inspectors, all 8 of them, they inspect used car dealers, they inspect funeral homes, and they inspect cosmetology. I guess people that are licensed cosmetologists. So these people, these 8 individuals, are spread, not only are they spread extremely thin, I think it's probably hard to be an expert in those 3 very different fields. And so as a licensed dealer with a physical location, I am inspected, right? We have inspections, inspector that pops by. We don't know when, and that's how it should be. We're unable to prepare. We just need to be in compliance all the time. And so that inspector comes by and they thumb through our files and they pull a few and they look around. They make sure that our cars are displayed properly with the required the disclosures on the cars, and that we're doing things in the proper and legal manner that gives consumers the ability to have confidence in us and understand that we're doing things the right way. We're processing paperwork correctly and all the such. These individuals that are doing business out of these little shoeboxes, you know, large buildings like this with hundreds and hundreds of licensed dealers in one building, that's hard to comprehend, right? The inspectors can't go to these places and find the dealer. The door is locked. They're not there. The little bitty box that they operate out of is just to meet licensing requirements. And they're selling cars at the Quick Trip, at the Chevron, on the corner, at their house, right? They're using Craigslist, Facebook, and they're selling cars to individuals that don't know any better, consumers that just see an ad, think it's a deal, and they go purchase the car. And then when and if they have problems, and I'm sure there's a significant percentage of them that do, they cannot find this person anymore. They don't know how to address that the car was sold without emissions, or the car was sold and the title's not available yet, or the car was sold and there wasn't a proper TOPS tag, temporary licensing permit put on the back of the car. Any host, or mechanical problem, right? They don't have, if the paperwork wasn't transferred correctly, right? And there's no way to go find the person that has been issued a license by the state of Georgia that's operating out of this shoebox. Additionally, these dealers that obtain these licenses in the tiny little offices, right? They're not always ethical people, right? They're from other states, and what they do is they obtain the license and then they rent access to the license to people that have no training whatsoever. People that could be felons, people that don't understand the car, but just anybody you can imagine. Let's say that I obtained one of these licenses and I want to let my friend Jason pay me $500 a month, and I'm gonna give him a dealer tag, which I know you guys know the problem with how many dealer tags are out there in our state right now, running around on every kind of car that shouldn't be, right? So I rent Jason access to my licensing. I give him a dealer tag, charge him $500 a month, and now he's got access to the auctions, and he's got access to my license. So as a consumer, this man appears to be a legitimate car dealer. Well, not only do I rent access to Jason, I got 15 or 20 other people that I'm renting access to, all operating out of this little shoebox that's legal, right? We've allowed it. And so of all the problems in the car business, I think this is the issue that I need to get across, desperately need to get across, because these people they're operating legally. Our state has allowed this to happen. So as a car dealer like myself, that I go to compliance training, I make sure we do everything right, I'm held accountable by my customers and by my state. I'm held accountable by having inspections. I'm held accountable because I'm findable. But our state is also allowing all of these people that cannot be held accountable operate every day. And these people have no overhead, right? They've got very little bills to pay because there's no physical place of business. There's no cars on display, right? They just have obtained the license through what I consider to be the loophole in the application process that allows for people to operate without having a physical location to display automobiles. Ultimately, I feel like competition is good, and there needs to be as many car dealers as want to be car dealers. And I appreciate the ability to do business in our state, and I want people to be able to start off somewhere. People with nothing to be able to start off and become something. I was that person one time, and so I want people to be able to compete with me. But it truly comes down to these people that are operating this way are hurting our neighbors and our families and consumers, right? And they're allowing people to work underneath them that have no vetting whatsoever, right? And so these are not good people. These are people that maybe once they were car dealers one time and they had their license taken away, and this is a way for that person who is misbehaved to get back in a side door, right? And continue with that behavior. And it's just something that I'm very passionate about, and I think if you guys will take time to listen and look at the application process, if we could make this correction, we could prevent a bunch of consumers, your constituents, from being harmed. We could get a lot of these dealer tags off the road. It goes on and on and on how many problems this would solve if you didn't allow people to do business in this way. So that's really what I would like to say without boring you guys to tears, and just trying to get that point across.
Good. Well, we've got several questions, but before we go to the questions, let's hear what Jason has to say. So Jason, if you would, come on, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. I will say this, we operate in 26 states, software for the automobile dealerships, and I can very much appreciate and love being a resident of Georgia. Georgia's very friendly to business. It's just a great state to do business in. It is also, as Jack said, very easy to get into the car business, which we want it to all be easy. Georgia definitely enjoys much less regulation in the automobile business than other states. Other states have minimum office requirements. From the time that you have to have your hours posted, you have to be there at that location at that point in time. Some of it is, overly regulated, I think, but ultimately Georgia is, I think, in the right path, other than this maybe over-allowing dealerships to come into the state. It's a complicated issue to solve. You have the likes of Carvana, Vroom, and other large, corporations out there that technically do not have a physical location, and they are never going to have a physical location. That's not their model, and the internet is a great place to sell cars. So it's not easily definable what you should do, but in this case, as Jack said, there used to be about 4,000 dealerships in the state of Georgia. My father was a licensed dealer from 1970 till 2000. I've grown up in the car business and understand it deeply. That 4,000 through this change has ballooned to about 7,500 dealers. The licensing process comes in where the dealerships will come in, apply for their license, and as the gentleman earlier stated, that process has slowed down a little bit. It's slowed down because there are 7,000 people applying, and the Secretary of State still has the same staff, if not less, than they did years ago. Jack, as a licensee, would have to come in and he would have to get his bond, get his insurance, get his location, then fill out his application and start the process. The goal of the Secretary of State is definitely to try and get people move through that process as quickly as possible, and the staff does an amazing job. But that process has gone from 3 to 4 weeks to sometimes 3 to 4 months. So in the meantime, Jack's paying rent at that location. That process definitely needs to be tweaked, and I think there is some already language out there now in a Senate bill, I believe, that addresses some of those issues. The other thing is the education side. Currently, Jack would have to attend a 6-hour educational pre-license class in order to get his license. It's absolutely stand 100% behind that. I'm sorry, that's 4 hours. The continuing education is 6 hours. That's every other year within 90 days of the renewal of the application. Personally, I think those two things need to be reversed. Jack's been in business for how many years? 10 years. So Jack has had the 4-hour pre-license and at least 5 continuing education classes. I think the process needs to be changed where it's 6 hours of pre-license and 4 hours of continuing education. That's a minor tweak that I think would go a long ways in the process of getting these dealerships more trained. Other states, Florida has 12 hours, North Carolina has 12 hours. I wouldn't go there. So much of that time is spent on sales tax training, which thankfully I'm 1,000% behind title ad valorem tax. It has simplified the taxation system throughout this state, where dealerships that sell in 15 different counties, their sales tax return is so easy now, and the state collects the TABT as it should when the title is transferred. So, all behind that. Other things with the licensing board, like I said, it's we actually just passed in January a new set of rules for the first time in 20-something years. We started on those rules long before COVID, and because of COVID, everything just got elongated. So right now, those are sitting at the governor's office so that he can decide whether he is going to sign it or not. The AG's office has come in and kind of stripped some of the power away from the board, stating that, I guess through past lawsuits and everything else with other agencies, that authorities the boards may or may not have. One of them is the licensing location. There's hopefully something that's going to pass through, giving the board back the power legislatively to come in and set the minimum standards, which could address some of these issues out there. Jack mentioned the out-of-state dealers, and if we roll back to, these dealerships are getting larger and larger. So you've got the likes of Carvana, Vroom. All of these are licensed independent dealers in the state. You've also got locations that have 20, 25 locations that are coming in from other states. The point of the designee right now does not have to have a Georgia driver's license. And I would agree that the designee does not have to have a Georgia driver's license, but it should be either Georgia or an adjacent state that's reasonably close to the place of business. If Jack lived in Mississippi and opened a location in Georgia, the licensing board needs to have a designee inside of the state of Georgia to answer to the board. It doesn't need to be Jack over in Mississippi. And as I've told people before, if I've got a lot and I'm not actively there, that's okay, I'm an investor. But I should have a general manager or someone who is the designee. Designees do not have to be the owners, they just have to be the person who the state looks to. So I think that would solve some of the issues as well, is making them have the Georgia driver's license or an adjacent state. The car business as a whole, sales are strong across most states that we're doing business in. Inventory prices have stabilized a little bit and even dropped a little bit, which is great news. Probably the last thing I want to mention is because the gentleman before mentioned the bond. So right now, the bond in the state of Georgia is $35,000. And the bond is solely for the title. It's not for, people misconstrue that, and I know you all know this, but people misunderstand and think, well, it's, the dealership sold me a lemon, I want to file against their bond. Bonds are for titles only. And so what happens sometimes is that the dealership goes out of business and holds 15, 20 titles sitting out there that then become a train wreck that the Department of Revenue has to deal with and assist these customers in getting these titles. One of the things that probably should be updated with inflation, that $35,000 bond has been in place as long as I can remember. I don't think it would really hurt to increase the bond value either.
Well, all right. Well, thank you. Let's, we've got some questions. Representative Washburn, you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to the thing about them being required to have just a closet office, so to speak. I'm assuming there is no requirement that that office has to be staffed during normal business hours.
No, sir.
There's not.
No requirement
That's one of the
whatsoever.
differences between Georgia and other states.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps them from being inspectable, right?
Right.
The inspector gets there, nobody's home. And so they're unable to verify.
And
things are
also,
being done correctly.
follow up, Mr. Chair. Also, if a consumer that's been damaged and deceived and wants to talk to somebody, they can't find anybody to talk to, I assume.
No, sir. There's
I
no
think-
ability to hold the seller accountable.
This is off the subject of automobiles, but there's been extensive reporting in the AJC lately about bad actors that are landlords that are out of state, but nobody responds to. So I think that's an interesting comparison, that a tenant might have a hard time finding somebody to talk to. And so anyway, I was just assuming they did not have to have a staff present.
They do not, and I do not want to throw all, and it is a fake term called brokers, but that's kind of the nickname they go by. There are so many that are great, and leasing legitimate size offices and actually staffing them than when they're at the auction and selling their cars over the internet. But this working in a shoebox, literally, some of them now are the size of the width of this desk.
Last comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The internet's a great thing, and of course it's affected every area of business. We could just go on and on about that. But one of the things is when there's no physical person to go see, then as great as it is, that is a problem. And I'm beginning to think that we have to start thinking about that in some different ways, because as great as it is, there are some problems that exist with it. It's affected every area of business, of course.
It is, and a lot of it goes back to the customer service. I mean, I'll tell the story. Have you ever tried to call Facebook? But these people have bought a $20,000 car. So.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, I feel like if you can't go back to where you purchased the car from and just have a conversation, then that opens the door for the seller. The seller knows that, right? They know that. It's very easy to block a phone number and out of sight, out of mind, on to the next. And I'm not saying these people don't intentionally create victims. I don't think that that's their intention. I just think that they're flying in a gray area and they're sloppy, and the result is that there's a larger percentage of people that get hurt and they're unable to do anything about it, right? And to Jason's point, a lot of people, when they buy a car, I mean, you guys know Americans don't have money to throw away. People don't have money to cover a $500 problem. And when they save up their money and buy a car, they need to be able to access the people they bought it from. They can access me. I have to deal with it all the time. I mean, I have to stand up and make things right. If we make a mistake, we have to fix it, right? And these people don't have to fix anything.
Cool. Thank you. Representative Bazemore, thank you. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you. Thank you, Mr. Carter and Mr. Reeves. I appreciate it, and I heard your passion when you were talking, and it disturbed me to hear what goes on. It sounds like we need to increase inspectors, for one, and then I want your suggestion on how we address this whole license issue?
Well, I think that that's fairly, fairly simple. We've talked about it, Jason and I have talked about it in length. If within the language of the application, if there was a physical size requirement, right? And it doesn't have to, again, I think the last thing, I know myself, and I feel like Jason's the same way, we don't want to stop somebody from starting off, right? There's a lot of good folks trying to do business that don't come from wealth or have access to capital. We don't want to hint, I think even the gentleman with the Home Building Association mentioned that. We want, you know, somebody to be able to get into the business. But at the same time, if there was a simple size requirement, right? I don't know what that is. Is it 20 foot by 30 foot, right? Is it the size? Maybe you take a small, you guys have seen the mobile offices that maybe somebody can install on a lot somewhere. But if there was just a simple size requirement, and what that size is probably debatable, but if it was, you know, 25 foot by 40 foot, that covers most physical building, most office buildings, retail places of business, right? Like maybe a little AT&T store or any of the small businesses that you see throughout our community. But when there's no requirement, that's what allows the 4.5 by 7 to exist. And so if there was just a size requirement for the place to do business, I think that one simple adjustment would oust these little shoebox offices, and it would prevent that from being a possibility. I mean,
Jack, one of the things that you could do is separate the two licenses. So you could actually formally create a broker's license with certain size requirements, because the last thing any of us want to do is to go into a rural community where the dealership operates out of I use this example all the time, an old gas station that was literally a 10 by 10 building with 2 bays to the side of it and room for 20 cars. Well, the minimum square footage might kill that person, and we don't want that. But in the same sense, we do not, because he has other places he can deal with customers. You know, he's talking to them outside, she's talking to them, they're bringing them inside and dealing with them on the paperwork side, and that's a great business model. The difference there is that when you go into the office suites, and there is, I could show you pictures, but there would be literally not enough room. It's honestly, Jack, some of them now are this wide, and the door can't open because there's a chair in there. So they've taken advantage of this process. So if you separated the two licenses, you could more closely define it and state that, you know, this place has to have this, and they have to have a place for customers to come in and express concern with the vehicle they've bought. But if you broke out the licenses, and then there are some things floating around out there to give the Used Motor Vehicle Dealer Licensing Board the ability to regulate the minimum standards. That would allow us to go in and study it as a board and come in and say, okay, well, it's not, you all have such a short period of time that you're in session. We have a year where we meet monthly, and subcommittees and everything else, that we could study it across the board and empower it. So.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
And
Something else that I want to add to what Jason's saying, and this is so simple, and I'm sorry, I don't want to treat you guys like you don't know something, but the term broker in our state, you guys, I want you to understand, there is no such thing. There is no broker license. If you hear someone say, I'm an automobile broker in the state of Georgia, that doesn't exist. You're either a licensed automobile dealer in our state, or you are not. There's one application. That's it. So Jason uses the term broker a good bit, and people use the term broker a good bit, but it doesn't actually exist. There is no title. You cannot be an automobile broker in the state of Georgia. It does not exist. So you are either a licensed dealer or you are not a licensed dealer. And I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you know that, but I think it's important, because we hear that term broker used all the time, and there is no such thing.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I could, I just wanted to speak to the two that spoke to the housing issue earlier. I so appreciate your help. And as I sat on that study committee, there's so many variables that we have to address and attack whatever we can. And I appreciate it, and I appreciate again Chairman Washburn working with him. And so thank you so much.
Yes, John?
Thank you very much for your time. I did want to mention that a few of the things they mentioned, Department of Revenue has approached us about doing a bill with some language about dealer tags, and that's going to include some language about the licensing board and about, hopefully, possibly, depending on the legislature, but also about square footage requirements for dealers as well. And that's been proposed by our association in the last few years, if anyone was interested in doing it, because a few legislators have mentioned to us they wanted to look at doing it. But I think this year is starting to really catch on to help dealers and consumers. By DOR is looking at introducing that in this session. I'm not sure if it's going to be a new bill or attached to a bill that's alive after crossover.
John, that was going to be my next question. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And I want to address the home builders as well as the auto dealers. Use your association, Ms. Cindy. Use your association, that's what their job is, and bring that to our attention. We're trying to spotlight a lot of the things that people in the industry assume we know, but we don't know. And you've got excellent representation here at the Capitol, and so utilize them. I know from our committee would be very interested in the hearing what John has to say and what Cindy has to say about some of the issues, and to see if we can find some solutions to that. But before we adjourn, we got one more, number 19. Is that?
Representative
Yes, ma'am.
Basil. Thank you. Real quick, the Senate bill was referenced, and I was just wondering, do you have a number so we can look at that and see what that is?
I can look it up real quick.
I appreciate it.
And I,
Bill 157.
Thank
Senate
you.
Bill 157.
Yes.
and final, because there is an employee from the Department of Revenue that sits on the board with us, so we work closely with the Department of Revenue. And one more education piece with this temporary operating permits and dealer tags, which are all, again, do you all know why dealer tags and temporary operating permits illegally obtained are so popular? I had no idea until a couple of years ago.
Well, please and educate us.
Because the drivers cannot get insurance. The drivers cannot get insurance. So they go to someone with an illegal dealer tag and buy or forge that dealer tag so that they can drive on the vehicle, drive on the road, because when law enforcement scans a dealer tag, it doesn't come back to Jack, it just comes back to, you know, this random dealership that has fleet insurance. Yeah, I would like to just say, that's something I did not mention, and when I was talking to you guys, because I don't want to talk so much that I tune out, you know. But the dealers that operate out of these tiny boxes, they have the same access to print temporary tags that I have, as they should, right?
As they should.
But there's extreme responsibility that comes along with printing a temporary tag, right? So if anybody that exists wants to come into my business and they say, hey man, I lost my license, or I don't have any insurance, or how about this one? This car's stolen. I want to be able to drive it. I got $200. As a dealer, I can manufacture out of thin air a tag that makes that automobile legal in the eyes of law enforcement to drive on the road with our children and our family. So if somebody comes into my business and says, hey, I've got this car and it won't pass emissions, will you print me a tag so I can get my kids to work? By the way, here's a couple $100, right? This happens, y'all, every single day. These dealers that are scrupulous and don't have any business having a license, and we know this from the association, they are buying more tags than they're selling cars. They're purchasing more temporary permits than the number of cars they're actually selling. So if I order 50 permits, but I've only sold 10 cars, where are they going? I'll tell you where they're going. They're going on cars that won't pass emissions. The operator of the car doesn't have a license. The operator of the car cannot buy insurance. The car is stolen. It cannot be otherwise registered, and the car is running up and down the road. And then when law enforcement gets behind this car that's got a temporary operating permit that was illegally produced by a licensed dealer, they have no idea. Law enforcement can't read the tag and determine whether the VIN number matches, whether the driver has insurance. They all come back. When law enforcement enters a temporary operating permit into their system, the insurance box is checked on every one. And it has.
And I think House Bill 1100 addresses a large part of that.
So that's a segment of this that I didn't even get into when I was originally talking to you guys. We carry great responsibility in the ability to print a temporary operating permit. That's a big deal, right? Somebody walks into my business and they want another tag, I tell them, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, ma'am. We issued you one tag, that's your tag. If you have a problem, you go to your local county tag office, and if you can explain in a way that makes, if it's legal, if you lost it, it came off in the car wash, there are some exceptions where you should be able to get an additional tag, but you're not gonna get it from my dealership because I'm responsible for how many of those I print, and I need to be able to pass inspection from the 8 inspectors, right? But these other people don't, and so I think that's another point that I really want to get across is the operating permits.
Both, Mo?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for the committee members' interest, House Motor Vehicles has got a bill coming to take care of that. It's drafted, it's prepared, they're working with DOR. It's coming this week. So I just wanted to tell you that we're all alarmed at this situation they're talking about. And it's been around for a while, and Motor Vehicles have been working on it. Todd Jones has been working on it. Chairman Corbett's been working on it. It's coming, okay? So it's in the works.
Well, good.
Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for shedding light on your industry. Mo, I appreciate the follow-up because we needed a follow-up on that. I think you've got a sympathetic audience here and interested into helping the industry, putting people in homes, putting people in cars, but doing it in a safe manner. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We appreciate it. Meeting adjourned.
Awesome.